Hi, my name is Liz Hiller with NACE. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, The Fall Forecast, New Data on Gen Z to Know Ahead of the Busy Recruitment. We encourage you to actively participate in the chat and please post your questions in the Q&A. It is my pleasure to introduce Kate Beckman, Director of Community and Insights for RippleMatch. Take it away, Kate.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Excited that you're joining us today on this Friday. Really excited to go over today's topic because we have some brand new data to share from RippleMatch, all about what you need to know ahead of the fall recruitment season on Gen Z candidates. To introduce myself just one more time, I run Community Insights and Brand at RippleMatch. So I foster all of our educational programming for the university recruitment community, and I also conduct all of our research on Gen Z and talent trends. So I'm about once a quarter surveying our Gen Z user base to really just get a sense of what are they experiencing, what's top of mind for them to bring these data insights to all of you. I do share some of these insights on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with me to stay in touch. I share some of the events RippleMatch regularly hosts for the university recruitment community, as well as some of our data insights. So happy to connect on LinkedIn if you want to stay in touch. I also wanted to share a bit about RippleMatch in case you're not too familiar with what we do. So RippleMatch is the recruitment platform that works for you, and we are the AI-powered solution for all of your early career recruiting needs. So our goal is really to empower your team to consolidate tools, reduce spend, eliminate manual tasks, and really transform your candidate experience to have faster response times and more intentional connections. And, a big way we're trying to do this is by solving some of those pressing challenges that are in modern early career recruitment. So this is expanding limited team bandwidth by, again, taking care of some of those manual tasks and speeding up things like sourcing, applicant review, in-person event check-in, follow-ups, long-term pipeline building. We also are focused on helping you build diverse pipelines with our student user base. So our roles are put in front of these candidates and they're matched with job opportunities and they say that they're interested. So you're getting just a set of qualified, diverse candidates. And of course, empowering your hybrid recruitment strategy. So as we'll go over in the data, folks are definitely leaning toward hybrid again this year. And so we're not just a virtual recruitment tool. We're really designed to power your early career recruitment strategies in any format and really give you that visibility of the ROI of your selected channels. And what we're going to be talking about today is a set of data that we've collected pretty recently. So first set of data we'll go over was collected in May 2024. It's just a sense of what our recruiters planning to do this fall to give you an idea of what folks are doing, as well as a new survey of about 75 recruiters conducted in August 2024. Just kind of a little bit of context on how folks are using AI technology. But the bulk of today's presentation will be our candidate pulse data. So this is a survey we just wrapped up in August 2024 of a little over 1,000 candidates. And this is going to cover about 3 sections of how candidates are finding jobs using AI, what candidates expect from your candidate experience, and what will influence candidates to accept offers and just relocate for a role. There's a lot of information in this slide deck, so I do believe NACE will send out the slides, but if for whatever reason you don't end up getting those or you want a copy, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and I can give you a copy of the slides, so definitely happy to provide that and give that information. But again, this is recorded and you should be receiving these slides. So there is a lot of information in here, so don't feel like you need to screenshot every single slide, but definitely excited to walk through all of this data. And as was mentioned, it's awesome when folks are active in the chat. So feel free to write in the chat and say hello, introduce yourself. If you have questions, you can put those in the Q&A box. And I do try to keep an eye on comments and questions throughout the session rather than leaving all of those to the end. So if you have a question that's relevant to a specific slide that I'm going over, a specific section, feel free to put that in the chat or the Q&A as we go. And I'm happy to take a look at those and answer those as we're going through it live. Otherwise, I will try to leave some time at the end to go through your questions. So let's dive into our first piece of data, which is just a bit of a check-in on how recruitment teams are planning to, approach fall talent acquisition. So as a reminder, this data was a survey about 230 recruiters that we conducted in May. So this was looking ahead to the fall from the summer. This is just kind of a check-in of how folks are planning to recruit this season. So Definitely more of a focus on in-person activities, but a hybrid season nonetheless. So we asked, what do you predict your breakdown will be of in-person versus virtual? And we see most folks are leaning toward hybrid, but bit more toward in-person than virtual. But we do have a number of folks that plan to do hybrid, leaning toward virtual as well. So just a bit of a, where is everyone at? We're seeing a lot of folks are planning to do this hybrid strategy. When it comes to going in person, we asked, how would you categorize each of the following for your in-person recruitment strategies? So what are folks finding to be the most effective use of their in-person time? And as you can see here, major specific career fairs are taking up the bulk of that core part of the strategy. So 62% of folks who took our survey said major specific career fairs are a core part of their strategy, compared to only 38% saying campus-wide career fairs are a core part of their strategy. This is a contrast actually from a year ago when we asked a similar question. We saw that campus-wide career fairs were much more of a core strategy than they are this year. So to take away from that, if you're wondering, what have folks found in the previous year to be probably the biggest source of ROI, it seems like folks are having more success with major specific career fairs, in-person events with on-campus clubs than they are necessarily with those campus-wide career fairs or large-scale conferences. When it comes to virtual recruitment, the biggest way that folks are leveraging virtual recruitment is to reach diverse candidates and really probably expand their reach to more diverse populations. So 44% of folks say that using virtual recruitment to reach more diverse populations is a core part of their strategy, followed by virtual events with students at specific schools. So we definitely are seeing that virtual recruitment is a big strategy for diversity recruitment. We do see that virtual career fairs are somewhat a part of strategy, but not really a core part of the virtual strategy. Switching gears into our more recent survey that we conducted of about 70 recruiters in August, we wanted to get a sense of how often are folks using AI technologies in a typical work week. So as you can see here, when you add up 1 to 2 times a week, 3 to 4, and every day, we see about 48% of recruiters are using AI tools at least once a week. And the next biggest share would be occasionally when testing out new tools at 24%. But the largest share is definitely falling in this. About half are using AI at least once a week. In terms of what folks are actually using, well, we first the concerns around AI if they're not adopting it. So we did see that in this slide, there's a number of folks that are not using it at all, or they're using it pretty sparingly. So the biggest barriers or concerns is folks are still concerned rightfully about the accuracy, reliability, ethical implications of AI tools, or just a lack of understanding or knowledge at 37%, limited access. Not as many folks actually concerned about the cost or having lack of time. So the biggest one is definitely just kind of understanding what are the concerns about the reliability or ethical implications of these tools. And as I was saying, in terms of what tools folks are actually using, so how does AI actually currently assist folks in the recruitment process? The biggest way that folks are using AI is through ChatGPT. So writing and editing job descriptions, such as with tools like ChatGPT, or leveraging AI content creation tools to help with recruitment events or marketing. So we aren't seeing quite as much adoption for some of the other things, such as AI tools that can record interviews, summarize notes, automated interview scheduling reminders, applicant sourcing, analysis of large data sets. So we're definitely seeing a lot of the current usage of AI is rooted in a lot of the content creation that folks are having to do in their roles, such as job descriptions or creating presentations. I am curious, and I will encourage folks to weigh in on the chat throughout. I'm curious if this lines up with how you use AI. It would be awesome if folks want to write in the chat and say if this tracks with what you're doing. Are you using AI such as ChatGPT to help with job descriptions? Are you using it for other ways? So we'd love to see a bit of that in the chat just to get a pulse in real time of how you are using AI if you are, and if this kind of lines up with your own experience. So definitely go ahead and contribute in the chat. It's great to just get some folks weighing in. So some key takeaways just from this section before we move into our student data. Hybrid recruitment is clearly a main strategy for teams. This is something with our own platform we are seeing a lot. Folks use us to do their virtual recruitment. So they're reaching, HBCUs, students at campuses across the country, but they're also heavily using our tool for events management for these large scale career fairs or conferences that they're attending due to our check-in process with the QR code. And it allows them to ingest all of their candidates and kind of deal with a lot of the admin stuff that's really time consuming. So definitely important to kind of get a sense of how are you going to have a successful hybrid recruitment strategy that's really intentional. I would say the second takeaway is AI usage is fairly regular. We're seeing about 50% of teams using it pretty, once a week. And we see that ethical standards are important when assessing AI. So when you're assessing new tools, it's definitely important, especially if there's algorithms involved, to understand what goes into those algorithms. So RippleMatch, for example, every year we do a bias audit. So we have our most up-to-date stats that we've passed the bias audit. We have really clear standards for what our algorithms do and don't do. So we're able to provide an algorithm bias audit the results of that to anybody who asks. And so it's important when you're assessing tools that are, really involved with actual hiring or assessing of candidates to make sure you're communicating with that organization or that vendor about what their standards are when it comes to ethical AI and that it's not just a black box algorithm. And I see in the chat that someone is using it for their chatbot on their career page to get basic questions answered. So that's definitely an interesting one. Would love if anyone has any other things that they're using AI for, just to weigh in, kind of share how you're using it. So thank you for sharing. Our next section, we're moving into our candidate forecast now. So the first area we're going to talk about is job and internship search behavior. So looking ahead at what candidates are planning to really do in their job search. So let's continue the AI conversation and start off with how candidates are planning to use it. So we asked our set of candidates, there are more than 1,000 candidates that are across universities, majors, equal split between men and women for the most part. We asked, are you using or plan to use AI tools to assist with your job or internship search? As you can see, 68% of candidates say, yes, I am using or plan to use AI tools to assist with my job search. When we dug a bit deeper to understand what are these actual tools, we said, which of the following ways are you leveraging AI? Gave them the option to select all that apply. As you can see here, similar to recruiters, ChatGPT is, or tools like that. So the text tools we're able to get, like Gemini. There's other ones that are that similar. You type in a prompt. They're using this to help tailor the resume or cover letter for a particular role. That's currently the biggest way that candidates are leveraging AI, similar to how recruiters are using those text-based tools to help write their job descriptions. This is followed by leveraging ChatGPT type tools to help proofread or improve email communication with recruiters. So a lot of this comes down to writing and assessments and having clearer communication and really tailoring it based on that. We see a little bit less adoption when it comes to, using AI tools to scrape open jobs, having AI tools that automatically submit applications on their behalf, leveraging ChatGPT to conduct mock interviews. We see about a third are doing that to kind of help with that skill building. 21% are using these for assessments during the hiring process. So that's something to note. While it's not fully widespread, we do see about 20% of candidates saying they're using ChatGPT tools during assessments that are happening during the hiring process. But largely, we're seeing candidates are using this to just help with that initial communication with their resume or cover letter, or if they're emailing you back and forth to sound more professional or proofread their communication. So this is just helpful to understand what candidates are using AI for, what they're not using it for, and really just prepare yourselves for this recruitment season ahead to know, what are your own guidelines or stances on AI and how it's used in the hiring process. Another interesting point, so as you saw on the previous slide, candidates are not using AI to submit applications, in mass, but we do see that the high volume approach to recruitment is going to remain unchanged for fall 2024. So this is a question we've been asking consistently in our survey to understand, how many applications are candidates submitting? How many do they plan to submit? during their job or internship search. At the end of last spring, we found a similar result that the kind of baseline for the majority of candidates is they expect to submit or they submitted at least 100 applications. I think from our survey we conducted in April, candidates said about 65% of candidates said they submitted around 100 or more applications. So looking ahead to fall, we asked our survey respondents, how many applications do you estimate you'll need to submit to land a job or internship offer that you plan on accepting? We see here 71% say at least 100 applications. And the way this breaks down is 42% predict they'll submit about 100 to 300 applications. And then 29%, so close to a third, suspect that they will submit more than 300 applications in order to land the right role. Only about a third actually think that they will submit less than 100 applications. So we see the majority is really rooted in expecting that 100 is kind of the minimum that they'll have to do to find the job or internship that they're happy with. So this is really useful to know just as you're going into the fall season. You can definitely expect another high volume application season where candidates may not be necessarily, taking a lot of time to read through the application or, make informed decisions, but it's really more of that numbers game. In terms of how they're actually submitting applications, we see that, one of the big ways is candidates are going through job boards and just kind of going down and finding roles they think they're a good fit for and applying through job boards. We also see a lot of plans to visit the web pages of companies that they're interested in seeing, if they have opportunities available, and they're applying for roles specifically recommended to them as a good fit for their skill set. So RippleMatch, for example, a core part of our technology is when candidates sign up, they make one profile and our technology recommends roles that are a good fit for them and puts them in front of them and asks them to say if they're interested or not interested. And if they're interested, that's when an employer on our page actually sees their profile. So they're seeing good fit candidates and they can decide to move that candidate to a first round interview. However, there are also public jobs listed on RippleMatch for companies that are using our automated applicant review technology. So we do still have that ability to post public jobs similar to what is a job board, even though the core of our technology is this more matching technology that candidates are identified for a good role. But as you can see here, going along with that high volume approach, candidates are definitely in this mindset that they're kind of scanning through job boards and finding what roles they deem themselves a good fit for, whether or not that's fully informed by what is truly a good fit. We also see a little bit less of a core part of their strategy is attending career fairs or attending events where they can make new connections. So we see career fairs is the smallest share of the core part of the strategy, though it definitely is a somewhat part of their strategy here. When they do attend in-person events, so that question of what kind of career fairs are they attending, we actually see that candidates are aligning with what recruiters are doing. So we asked candidates, assuming they're available to you, which in-person recruitment events would you be most likely to attend when searching for jobs or internships this year? And we see 67% say they would be most likely to attend major specific career fairs, compared to 45% saying they'd be most likely to attend general campus-wide career fairs. And I think this is definitely a link between why companies in the past year may have shifted from going to campus-wide career fairs to the more tailored major specific career fairs, because it's likely candidates were attending those major specific ones more often. And it's definitely creating a sort of feedback loop where that's where the employers are going, that's where the candidates are going. We also see that candidates are definitely likely to attend info sessions hosted by a specific company. And candidates are slightly less likely to attend some of those professional development type workshops or informal networking events, panel discussions or those large scale conferences. So if you're kind of wondering where to maybe put some of those resources, info sessions hosted by your company or attending those major specific career fairs can be a really useful way to meet students where they're at. And I think it's definitely important to have a way to track how these events are doing for you, the kind of results that they're doing. And so I know a lot of our partners on RippleMatch that use our events tool to track these. They're, sourcing ahead of time to tell candidates at certain schools like, hey, we're coming to your campus. We have an info session that we're doing. We'll also be at this major specific career fair. And then they use the tool to take attendance in those events. So definitely having a way ahead of the season to be tracking what is working for you the most is an important thing to do. So moving on to virtual events, we see that candidates are most likely to, like I said, attend company-hosted info sessions. So ask the same kind of question, which virtual recruitment events would you be most likely to attend when searching for jobs or internships? And we see that 58% say virtual info sessions hosted by a specific company. I think info sessions over the years have maybe, gotten a bad rap for being, too standard or not necessarily exciting. But I think there's something to the simplicity of having an info session that candidates can come in a kind of low pressure way and learn about your company, learn about some of the questions that might determine if they're interested in applying for your role or give them an edge in the hiring process because you know that they're already engaged and interested. This is followed by virtual major specific career fairs. We don't see that a lot of candidates are going to, general career fairs as much or less interest in actually recent grads discussing their current roles. I think a big reason for that is I think candidates are trying to really align with what can get them a job. So I think first and foremost, it's important to understand, how are you connecting your event to that end goal of, submitting an application or getting a job. And I think an info session is very transparent in terms of how that relates to applying to a job, as is virtual major specific career fairs. But only 11% of candidates say they don't plan to attend any virtual recruitments at all, compared to 5% say they don't plan to attend any in person. So candidates definitely are planning to attend both in-person and virtual events, and they're most likely to visit those virtual info sessions and major specific career fairs. So definitely helpful to know as you're thinking about your event strategy, or if you're thinking of adding any last minute events, these are the ones that candidates are most likely to attend. So some takeaways here, and again, if you have any comments or questions, definitely put those in the chat. It's helpful to kind of know if this data is aligning with your strategies, with what you're seeing in your own, approach to recruitment this fall. So definitely weigh in the chat with any of your own thoughts. But some key points to understand about this section, as we saw, candidates are leveraging AI tools really for resume creation or tailoring, as well as their communication. So just helpful to know that candidates are using this to help improve their communication. So if you are doing something that maybe involves testing or assessing for just written communication skills or emailing, just keep in mind candidates might be using ChatGPT, and consider how you might want to tailor your assessments accordingly. We also see the mass apply era will continue in the fall 2024 and then throughout the 2025 season. So really important to get a sense of how you can deal with this applicant volume, have some safeguards in place to just be prepared for that volume. And then we do see candidates are leveraging multiple online methods to find jobs and internships, from going through job boards, submitting their applications, which no doubt is contributing to the mass apply era, as well as going directly to the career pages of companies using matching tools like RippleMatch. Though they are definitely still planning to attend virtual events, as we saw, it's not in-person events and virtual. It's not necessarily a core part of their strategy in the same way that leveraging online tools is. So definitely helpful to know ahead of the fall season. Moving on to candidate experience. So this is an area that we've consistently surveyed about, but we have some fresh new information on just what candidates are hoping to get out of the candidate experience, what is encouraging them to apply initially. So let's dive in. First question here is a brand new one that we've introduced in our survey. So this is not one that we've asked previously. So it's really interesting to see this information. We asked, if you're interested in a role, but a company does not have a salary or pay range displayed on the internship or job listing, are you less likely to apply? This is really interesting because 53% of candidates say that they are less likely to apply because they don't want to waste their time if it's not in their ideal range. This is really interesting because while 53%, it's not 80%, it's not a full majority. It is more than half of candidates that may decide to, just move on to the next application if that pay range isn't listed. 47% say that they're not less likely to apply. They'll wait and see what the pay range is during the interview process. But just knowing that you could turn away, more than half of candidates if you don't have some kind of range listed is really beneficial to know. I know a lot of companies, if you offer competitive pay, it can be a really great advantage to put that on your listing for candidates. And if you don't offer, if you just have a kind of standard pay scale, that's also helpful to list on there. So you're not spending your time, going through a bunch of candidates that after that first screening interview might not be very interested, or they might just be going through that process because they want an offer, but they aren't necessarily invested in your company. So this is definitely an action item you can take away to consider, is it worth putting pay transparency on our job listings, even if our state doesn't require it, given that so many candidates might be less likely to apply if they don't see that initial range listed. We also asked a question around when candidates are conducting research to get a sense of, we know that candidates are submitting a lot of applications. How much are they actually looking at the job description or looking at additional details? And so as you can see here, we asked at what stage of the job or internship search do you read the entire job description? So beyond the title, initial description. So many job descriptions have additional perks and benefits, information about the company. And it is encouraging to see that 69% of candidates say that they do read the entire job description before applying. I know there's been some questions of, candidates are submitting so many applications. Are they actually reading through these postings before hitting apply? Or are they just kind of skimming the title and, the first couple sentences? And we do see candidates say that they are reading that entire job description. So if you're thinking about how to reduce high volume, including important information in your job description up front can be a really good way to maybe mitigate some of that high volume by including important information like location or type of work format or pay, because the majority do read that information. And then we asked at what stage of your job or internship search do you conduct additional research on a company to determine if you're actually interested in working there. And we do see that about a third of candidates say that they're researching before they do apply, but many other folks are saying that they actually do the bulk of that research after they actually have that first round interview or, right before the first interview. So candidates are not, at a large scale doing additional research outside of what's in the job description. So if you're thinking of, how can I make sure I'm connecting with the right candidates, you're going to want to put a lot of that important information in a concise and clear way in that job description and not necessarily assume that candidates are going to be doing outside research to determine, yes, this is a company I'm interested in working for. It might just be in that job description, and they might not be doing that additional research until after they've actually submitted that application. So helpful to know, where to spend some of that time and the upfront information to put a lot of that in your job description. In terms of candidate expectations to hear back at all stages of the hiring process. So this is a question we've asked in different, stages, just how quickly do you expect companies to get back to you when you're submitting an application? And typically we've heard 5 to 7 days, but we broke it out this time to understand, was there any variance or, additional leeway as the process goes? And we see that after submitting an application, most candidates would expect to hear back between 3 business days and 7 business days. So the majority is 5 to 7, but of course there's less here as well. So candidates would prefer to hear back within 5 to 7 business days. Then after completing the first round interview, you can see there's an increase in hearing back between 3 to 4 days in terms of their moving forward or being rejected, but still most of it is centered around 5 to 7 business days. And this stays pretty consistent about after completing all interviews and assessments. What is your expectation of how quickly you should receive communication that you're being offered a position or rejected for the role? And again, this sits in that 5 to 7 business days or 3 to 7 business days. So the majority of candidates are really expecting to hear back at, maximum 7 days or less. So it's just important when you're thinking about how to be competitive or how to make sure that if you do have the best candidates in your pipeline, you are moving them through the process and they're not losing interest or going to another company. So this is about where the expectations sit. It's not very different than information we've collected in previous surveys, but it is interesting to see that this doesn't really change throughout the hiring process. This is kind of that golden number that most candidates really would like to hear back within 3 to 7 days. And more than that is not something that they prefer. We also asked when interviewing for a role, how do you assess an organization's culture before joining? And there's actually a huge amount of candidates that are researching and reading through online or Glassdoor reviews. So candidates are going to those online reviews. They're seeing what folks are saying about your company. And so as you can see, 69% do say that they're going to those online reviews. About half are really using it to ask questions during the interview process, which you would think would actually be more. So I think this is a good example of a place that you can encourage candidates to ask questions. Obviously, we all say, what questions do you have for me in the interview process? But many of these Gen Z candidates, this is the first time that they're interviewing for internships or jobs. You might consider in a interview packet that you send to candidates, giving examples of questions that are useful to ask during interviews to help them uncover why a company is a good place to work. Because right now, candidates are preferring to kind of go online outside of the interview and actually read those reviews rather than during the interview process, using that time to actually understand more about the company and culture, as well as speaking with current employees or attending panels. They're not really going to TikTok accounts or Instagram accounts to understand company life. So they're definitely going more toward what other folks have said about you. And as we know, Glassdoor folks either feel really strongly about a company, either in a good way or a bad way, to kind of post their reviews. So it's definitely something that cannot always paint the most accurate picture of a company. So I would definitely encourage candidates and provide some resources to help them make the most of the questions that they could ask during the interview process, given that I would say, there's about half of candidates that are not really leveraging that time during the interview process to understand if an organization's culture is right for them. In terms of what candidates say contributes to a negative experience when interviewing for a role, 61% say lack of information on what to expect from the interview process, some number of rounds, agenda of speakers. So I really recommend coming up with some kind of interview packet or some information you can provide to candidates ahead of time and really tailor it, I think, for early career candidates. I think it's really important to keep in mind that early career candidates are very different from the other candidates in your company. This is the first time many of them are going through the internship process, the job search process, so they might not know the things that feel very obvious to most of us. So in these interview packets, while of course you can adapt it to ones you send out to any candidate, I think it's important to keep in mind what you can provide that would be useful for an early career candidate. And that would include, maybe questions to ask at the end of your interview, or, best practices for showing up on the Zoom meeting, just things that can really help them know what to expect and feel prepared and confident for the interview. This is also followed by unprofessional behavior from the interviewer. So late for interview, unfocused, unprepared for questions. Not sure, again, I don't know how many interviews candidates typically do, so it's hard to know what they're comparing it against, but I think that's just a good thing to keep in mind. It can be off-putting to some candidates if they sense that something feels unprofessional. But the rest of the things, candidates are not necessarily deeming impersonal rejections after completing a first round interview as really egregious. We're not necessarily seeing, personalized follow-ups that can contribute to negative experience, but I think definitely lack of information on what to expect is kind of the biggest thing, and a really actionable way you can improve the interview process and candidate experience generally. So key takeaways here, and then we have one more section, and then I will leave some time for questions. So if you have questions that are coming up throughout this, I definitely encourage you to put those in the Q&A box, and I'll make sure I get to those in the session. So start thinking about what questions you want to ask so I can leave the appropriate amount of time. But some key takeaways here. As we saw from that first slide in this section, pay transparency definitely impacts candidate interest in the role. So I would definitely take this back to your team and consider how you can add in pay transparency, add in those ranges if you're concerned that not having it is going to turn away some candidates. 5 to 7 business days is the standard expectation throughout the hiring process. And I saw a comment in the chat asking if most employers feel they can meet the candidate response time expectations. That's a good question, and I would be curious if anyone wants to weigh in. I think this was just sent to host and panelists, but the question someone had is if employers feel they can meet that candidate response time expectation of 5 to 7 days. I'm curious from all of you if this feels feasible for you to achieve. I will say from our own data from the RippleMatch platform, in the past year, we saw that the median response time for recruitment teams who use RippleMatch was about 6.2 days. So that was the average recruiter on RippleMatch was able to go through the candidates and respond back in 6 days. Whereas above that, the kind of super users in the 90th percentile were able to get back to candidates in 1 day or less, whereas those that trailed behind definitely, closer in the 10 to 15 day range. So I do think it is achievable. And I think what it comes down to is having the systems in place to, one, make sure that you're bringing in the right applicants, you have the right kind of initial questions or, guardrails in place that would be very clear to candidates that this is not a position that, they might be qualified for, but then having a tool like RippleMatch that is showing you qualified candidates or allows you to sort your applicants based on if they're qualified or, definitely don't meet your qualifications. So I think it's important to look into that kind of tool ahead of the fall season. And finally, candidates want to know what to expect from the interview process. So on this kind of thread of transparency, candidates are definitely wanting to know what they're going to expect going into an interview process in terms of length of time it might take, how many people they're talking to, who they're talking to. So definitely good to keep in mind. And feel free if you're adding comments, make sure you put it to everyone if you want all the folks to see it in the chat, because I think it's easy to put host and panelists if you need to send it to everyone. Cool. So our last section is what will impact offer acceptances. So this next slide is probably going to be a little bit concerning for folks and not necessarily the best data point, but I think it's an important one to share and a little bit surprising. So we asked candidates, if you accept a job or internship offer this fall, do you plan to continue to passively search for opportunities in case a better one comes along? And 73% of candidates say yes, they do plan to continue to passively search for opportunities in case a better one comes along. This is pretty similar to the share of candidates that we've asked in previous surveys. Are you open to reneging on an offer, or would you consider rescinding an offer if a better one came along? So it's a similar question, but just phrased, a little more directly. So if you accept an offer, will you continue to passively search for opportunities? And as you can see, about 3/4 of candidates do plan to continue to just keep an eye out or continue searching for opportunities. So it's definitely something to keep in mind as you're thinking about, the goal is to extend your offers, get candidates to accept them, but really thinking about what is your strategy to keep candidates accepting that offer and just understanding what might drive them to continue searching for opportunities. So some of the ways that we asked, what are some things a company could do that would make you less likely to continue passively searching for other roles? Top few are stay in touch on a regular basis to beginning the position with the company. And previous survey we did said candidates would like to hear from you every 3 to 4 weeks after accepting an offer. So coming up with that keep warm and communication strategy. And then 53% say walk through my compensation package so I can understand its full value. 11% say that no matter what happens, they'll just continue to passively look for opportunities. But these are some things that might impact a candidate's likelihood to continue searching for those opportunities. We also asked, which of the following are most important that would influence you to accept a job or internship. And as you can see, the most important are role aligning with long-term career interests, competitive compensation and benefits, and professional development, potential for growth or upward mobility. So these are the big ones. It's really, if you put it into two buckets, compensation and then career development and growth and it aligning with what they want are the big ones that definitely will determine if a candidate is excited about your offer. So I think that's another thing that's important about those pay transparency questions and just understanding if a candidate, feels good about that offer and understands everything that entails that compensation package, because a candidate might go through a process just to have an offer on hand, but not necessarily be really excited about the company, its direction. And this is really important also in your interview process, that you have the right questions to determine, one, if the candidate is excited, does this align with their long-term fits? Because if not, it might lead to more renegs down the road. So we see on the next page a couple other things that are important to candidates. Definitely stability of company, good experience applying to and interviewing with the company can make a difference for about 50% of candidates. And then some less important things are social impact initiatives, companies' overarching commitment to diversity and inclusion, companies, hybrid work format. So we definitely see the big ones are compensation and long-term career interests. And I see a question in the chat. As students are willing to continue looking for opportunities even after accepting, is it best practice to stick to spring recruiting versus fall? That is a good question. And I would say, I think that most companies will continue to recruit in the fall. So I think focusing too much on spring recruiting might, end up having you miss out on a lot of really talented candidates. What I do think is a good strategy is to probably make sure that you're not just assuming every part of your hiring will be taken care of in fall, and maybe include some wiggle room that if you get those renegs that you're, hiring some candidates in the spring, or leave some open, head count. So maybe 75% of your recruitment is done in the fall, or 60%. The other 40% is happening in the spring. One, to catch those candidates that may not realize that companies open up their applications in, August of college. Some candidates might still think that, okay, it's January, time to start looking for my summer internship. So I think it could be beneficial to carve out some space for those more spring oriented candidates, and then also to kind of help soften that blow against renegs. I think though it depends on your company and how maybe competitive you are with compensation, just knowing that can happen. I do see a question. Is there any data on renegs, as in how many students jump from their first offer? Yes, that is. I didn't include that in this presentation, but I have in spring when I did that survey, I asked candidates who had accepted an offer, have you rescinded an offer, this year? And 26% of candidates in my spring survey that accepted offers said they did renege on an offer for a different one. So about 26% of students that took the survey. So again, that's one sample size, but you might be able to, in previous years, it was about 20%. So I'd say anywhere from 20 to 25% of candidates might actually move forward with reneging on that offer. But consistently over time, about 70 to 75% of candidates have said they are open to rescinding an offer. This question is the first time I phrased it as, will you continue to search for offers after you've accepted one? And it's pretty much the exact same amount of candidates said that they would renege on an offer. So what that tells me is that, 70 to 75% of candidates are essentially just open to entertaining additional offers after they've accepted one. And just kind of an update on what candidates prefer in terms of work settings. This isn't too different from stats we've seen previously, but we see that candidates definitely prefer largely a hybrid work setting. The least popular option is a fully remote option. So candidates today want to be somewhat in the office and, prefer to have some interaction with their colleagues. Not that a candidate wouldn't accept a fully remote offer, but as you can see, there's definitely more of that preference toward hybrid, and especially hybrid based on personal preference. But the majority of companies these days, I think they are hybrid. It's more based on some structure of company distinction. But this is just to understand what candidates are kind of looking for in their offers. In terms of candidates, so we asked that question about, does having pay listed impact your ability to apply? And I asked a similar question, are you applying to opportunities even if you have no interest in the posted location of the role? And candidates are actually open to still applying and entertaining offers. I think maybe it would be harder to convince them, but we do see that 76% of candidates say, yes, if I get the role and the offer is good enough, I may consider moving. So only 24% of candidates are saying, no, it's not worth my time, even if I were to receive an offer. So the takeaway here is just understanding that if you post a location, it might not necessarily decrease the amount of applications you get. Maybe it would increase it a small amount, since we do have this amount of candidates that say it's not worth their time to even apply. But about 76% of candidates have an openness to moving somewhere if they go through the whole process and it's in line with what they're looking for. Now, in terms of what they are looking for and what would encourage them to move, so we asked how important are the following factors when deciding whether or not to move to a location for a full-time job opportunity. As you can see, high salary in relation to cost of living is the number one thing that would convince candidates to relocate. So if you are located in something that's not maybe a very attractive city, you're not a well-known place to live, or maybe you aren't, it's more suburban or rural, which candidates today are not quite as interested in. Definitely highlighting the salary and how it relates to the cost of living. I think candidates are likely to want to move to, and we've seen this in previous data, candidates are definitely most interested in moving to cities like Chicago, San Francisco, New York, other cities that just have a much higher cost of living. So candidates definitely still are going to high cost of living cities, but if there's a place that they're maybe less interested in going to, but they can net a high salary because the cost of living is lower somewhere, that is something that weighs into candidates' decision to relocate. But candidates, as you can see, they do want public transportation. They want an inclusive culture and progressive social policies. They want availability of a community. So these are things that really play into what candidates are looking for, which, you know, I think some of these things might encourage candidates to move to cities, whereas high salary in relation to cost of living is something that can encourage them to move to places that maybe don't have some of these other items. So just something to keep in mind as you're highlighting this to candidates. Candidates are not, we see that they want inclusive cultures, community, but they're not necessarily looking for things like great nightlife. So it doesn't have to be a party city. They're actually looking more for a community, inclusive cultures, progressive policies, things that they feel comfortable rather than just moving somewhere to kind of enjoy the nightlife or things like that. So takeaways on this section, and I'll leave some time for questions. So if you have questions, now would be the time to start submitting those in the chat or the Q&A, because we are just about the end of our session. So takeaways from this section is candidates, they will continue to passively search for roles even after they accept that offer. So just important to understand that you need a keep warm strategy, but you also need to communicate with candidates when they accept that offer to understand they're on the same page when it comes to compensation and long-term career paths. As we see, compensation and long-term career growth drives candidate interest in accepting that initial offer. So those are really intertwined in terms of how you might prevent renegs. And then candidates are open to relocation, even if they aren't initially interested in that location. So it's important to keep in mind, depending on what kind of city you live in or location that your company is located in, what you might want to highlight to get candidates excited about your opportunity. So definitely important to keep that in mind. For our final takeaways for this entire presentation, definitely important to find technology like RippleMatch that supports the biggest challenges of applicant volume and hybrid structure this fall. Another key one is it's important to see how you can achieve that 5 to 7 response window this fall during candidate communications to really try to meet those expectations and set yourself apart as an employer of choice. And then be prepared for candidate renegs. While this has been a recurring problem we've seen, we do see that candidates plan to continue to search for opportunities even if after they've accepted that offer. So do what you can to mitigate that upfront by really highlighting compensation and career paths. So on that note, I will take some time to answer some questions. If you want to learn more about RippleMatch, I encourage you to scan this QR code or visit this link I just shared. So this is a chance, ahead of the fall, if you're wondering how you can reach more candidates through virtual recruitment methods, how you can really decrease your response time, so improve some of those metrics in terms of how quickly you respond to candidates or just going through high volume. I definitely encourage you to see how RippleMatch can help. I know we have a number of folks who have been to some of our sessions before. We have some familiar names here as well with just some of our customers. So if you haven't had the chance to learn about what we do, definitely encourage you to scan the QR code or click the link in the chat. We'd love to talk about how we can help you this fall just achieve your recruitment goals and make your university recruitment process a lot more efficient. Are there any questions? Otherwise, I can hand it back to our NACE host, and we can go ahead and end this. I'll give everyone just a moment if anyone has any last minute questions. I did see someone asked if there's any, if the slides will be shared after the event. The NACE team does plan to send those out, but you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to share those slides if you don't get that email or anything, but give everyone just a couple more seconds if anyone has some questions. But I think we're good to go ahead and end this. So I will hand it back to the NACE team to end the session.
Hi, thank you so much, Kate. We appreciate your data. Wonderful to hear all of that important information. And we appreciate everyone joining us today, and let us know if we can do anything for you in the future. All right, have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.